Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have a number of comments about this report. The first is about something that's missing. We have no data in it about Housing Ombudsman's rulings on complaints about the council. Now, given that this was first alerted to me, the scale of the problems in the service, I would have thought it was a useful indicator to monitor, and they now declining, and what areas do they currently focus on. There are certainly still happening. There was one published last week. I note that 368 says that successful prevention is more difficult for families than single people, given the lack of affordable family accommodation across the city when compared to the buoyant exempt accommodation and HMO markets. This, of course, in part because family housing is being lost to the EA sector. We desperately need the implementation of the Supported Housing Act and think it's time to lobby for this. And we should acknowledge that buying family homes from the private rented sector, while helpful in terms of providing better temporary accommodation, does of course itself reduce the supply of family housing in the private sector. I'm also frustrated that there is no data on the total number of residents or children in TA. We just get household data with no trend data other than the number in B&B for over 6 weeks, which is a minor subset of the overall picture. If you don't provide this key information in your reports, we will keep asking for the updated figures via regular written questions. I understand that written questions are a burden on the Council, but unless you provide such key basic information in your reports, we will continue to keep asking for it. While I welcome the comments in 3, 8 and 16 to 18 regarding the reinstallation of CCTV, I believe it's essential that in all sheltered housing blocks, it is somewhat ironic that immediately before this section, there is a talk about adopting a preventative approach to ASB. And yet on CCTV appears only the existing ASB hotspots that will get cameras an example of a reactive policy. I think it's clearly evidence now that every sheltered housing block is potentially vulnerable to antisocial behaviour and needs CCTV as a preventative approach. This isn't really a big ask, and I'm sure will save the Council significant costs in terms of responding to antisocial behaviour in the long run. We also need to review the allocation policy to such blocks. At the moment, highly vulnerable residents are being housed there without sufficient support to prevent them causing huge distress to the other residents, many of whom are themselves highly vulnerable. We need a much more intelligent approach to the way we house our elderly and vulnerable residents in our city. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Mohammed Idris.